It's Rick without the K. James presents, in my opinion, podcast.
Don't forget to hit the subscribe button, as well as the notification bell. Thank you for watching.
Because this has been such an extensive time together and beautiful, the next few questions really can just be kind of tied into one. For one, it was, as a comedian, when do you give up? Which Rudy just touched upon briefly a little bit with his why the fuck would you go back? You already came this far.
Yeah.
As well as a comedian, how do you how do you deal with criticism, and as well as do you have support in the game? Are there peers that support you? So support, criticism. Should you give up, and when?
You want to go first?
I'll go first. Because we kind of we kind of touched on this the other night, so I'm gonna reiterate some of that stuff. In terms of criticism, when it comes to people criticizing your stand-up comedy, you need to really consider whether you respect that person to begin with. Just to begin with, if that's somebody that you kind of say to yourself, okay, like this, I value this person's character, I hold this person in a certain regard. I want to open myself up to their ideas because I recognize their character. Perhaps they'll have something to offer that will actually resonate with me. So you need to consider that, because everybody's going to criticize you. Everybody's going to fucking have their opinion on you, and you can't just let everybody infiltrate your mind. You have to have your select few that you look at and you say, and here's the crazy part. Everybody's going to criticize, but very few people are going to ask for criticism. That's the difference. If you can get to a point where you can ask for criticism, you're already winning, because you're seeking out how to get better. You're seeking out feedback. A lot of people don't like criticism, and not coincidentally, they will never ask for criticism. But if you can learn how to ask for criticism, then that means that you've already taken the steps to consider who is a good, reliable source to give me feedback on my shit, which means that you're already open to the idea of evolving, which means that you're open to the idea that you're not perfect and you have flaws and you have shit to work on. So that's a good sign. If you can learn how to ask for criticism, that's already a good sign.
So
you know what I mean?
Your support, then.
My support, in terms of comedy, bro, my support. Well, emotionally, my friends that and my family that know that I've invested this much time into stand-up comedy, they support me. Like they'll ask me, like, how are your shows doing? How's everything going? Oh, I saw you're gonna be here. That's really cool. I saw you're gonna be there. That's dope. So they show me a lot of positive support in terms of making me feel like I matter. And usually people that are close to you, your friends and your family, they have a knack for doing that because you love them and you care about them. So you're going to care about what they think, right? But now outside of them, though, in terms of like support of my career, bro, nobody's here to support me. Nobody gives a fuck if I make it. Nobody gives a fuck if I
care, Rudy.
I highly doubt that. I highly doubt that, because
You're a hater.
No, I'm not a hater. I'm not a hater. I just know that you're occupied with your shit. You're preoccupied with you. You can't do for me what I can do for me. You know what I'm saying? And it's you have to do what you got to do for you, and I respect that. You know what I mean? So I'm not really seeking out support from like the comics or the community, or anything like that. Like, it's cool when they do that. But if they don't do that, bro, like, I expect motherfuckers to not do that. That to me, that's like the normal course, And what was the last one? It was support. It was criticism.
Criticism, and should you give up, or when do you give up, or should you
give up?
I think you should probably stop doing stand-up comedy when you feel like you're making points that aren't funny anymore. If you're spending all your time only trying to make a point and be right, then you're not doing comedy.
Then do a TED Talk.
Yeah, and TED Talks are dope as fuck. That's actually one of my life goals, is to do a TED Talk. So I'm not talking shit on TED Talks. But the question is, when do you know how to stop doing? When should you stop doing comedy? Because comedy is about isn't it, there's an element of being right. There's a tinge of you're right, but the main feeling and the main hue in comedy is funny. Funny. Laugh. Ha ha ha. If you're on stage just making points and saying shit that you think is right, but nobody's laughing, you're not doing comedy.
Yeah.
So if you find yourself in a position where you're on stage and you're more fucking eager to show how smart you are instead of being eager to show how funny you are, stop doing comedy, because you're not doing comedy. Matter of fact, you don't have to stop doing comedy. Comedy stopped doing you already. You feel me? And I feel like a lot of comics are vulnerable to that, because I know I am. Because sometimes I get caught up in these moments where I'm like, man, I want to fucking show I'm right about some shit. And then you go on stage and you think that that's going to translate because you love the smell of your own fucking shit so much that you go on stage and you're like, I'm about to make this fucking point. Yeah. And then there's no joke. And then you realize you're like, oh shit, I'm not doing comedy right now. Right. Yep. I'm just over here making points. So when you get to that level, you should probably consider putting the mic down and give it some time at least. And maybe it'll come back to you. Maybe it'll come back to you then.
I will say, maybe I'm not smart enough to try to make points. So when it comes to comedy, man, I feel like what was the first thing? Support, right? Support. That wasn't the first thing. That was like the second or third thing. I can't remember all of them.
Support, criticism, and should you give
criticism. Up? We'll start with the criticism. The criticism is, I'm constantly. I think that's obviously you could tell through this podcast is I'm constantly thinking, how can I make shit better? Who's gonna criticize that? I mean, we had that conversation while I was setting up everything. Is I was afraid how somebody else might take my thought. I'm always that way. You know what I mean? Whether I'm on stage or off stage. So that part of me, I've come to both of you, and been like, hey man, I'm having this. What do you guys think about that? Because I want to open that dialogue with people. I want to understand why the fuck I think the way that I think sometimes. Yeah. And I know a large part of it is just my upbringing, you know what I mean? So I view shit differently than most people to begin with. So I know that, but I'm trying to understand, well, why is it that you think the way you think? Because I know I'm not probably right in my way of thinking, but why is it that you're coming to that conclusion? So that way I can see that train of process, that thought of process. And so I'm always open for criticism. I may not like it. Nobody fucking really likes it, you know what I mean? But there's going to be a lot of things that I go home tonight and just think about what I said here, you know? And I might call you guys up and you're like, dude, we did that podcast. Like, leave me alone. Like, stop asking me about this shit, right? But that's me, is I think about it and then I overthink it, then I rethink it, then I appreciate
your passion for doing this type of shit, because I personally love this type of shit, but also I appreciate the fact that you're open for these types of conversations, and the fact that you go home and you think about the shit, because that's what we all should be doing. Like, we should all be like, okay, I've thought with like minds. Let me reconsider some shit. Let me reevaluate some shit. That's what you're supposed to do when you get into a conversational, philosophical setting like this.
As far as support, whether you thought I was joking or not, man, I support you and everything that you do. I support this motherfucker. You know what I mean? Like there's a reason we're actually sitting here on a Friday night, is because I do enjoy the time spent with you guys. And if I didn't, the reason I wanted to do this podcast is because, again, I saw us edit the last shit and I was like, man, all three of us did pretty well together. We worked together. It constructed. Let's do it again, but let's do it in a more serious format. And now I'm going to go edit it and be like, Jesus Christ.
These motherfuckers.
Maybe we don't do good in serious shit, but I don't know.
No, I think, bro, I like this shit. I think this is good, man.
Good conversation.
No. And again, don't think, again, this is me overthinking.
Yeah. Like, even when I'm
giving you credit earlier, I have to make sure that, hey, nothing against you, Jose, because in my mind, I'm like, what is he thinking when I say that? Like, you know what I mean? Like,
the only way to balance it out, the only way, you giving me all those compliments earlier, the only way to balance it out, we got to do a slam book. We got to do a slam book, all right? So I'll go get a notebook. I'll start it. I'll do Jose. Jose does Rick.
Everybody gets participation trophies.
You guys remember slam books? Or am I dating myself right now?
No.
I'm dating myself right
Mean
now.
Girls and shit. It was all
That's a
Mean
good
Girls.
term, dating myself. That's funny.
But you know, as you say that, you know, when you say nobody can tell you how to do comedy, you know, I tell people, you know, what's funny is Mike, the dude that used to work at Tommy T's, the dude with a cane and limped and shit. Like when I started comedy, because I didn't have enough time, I tell people what led me into comedy was doing slam poetry. And I said, so I would go up and do a poem and then I would start my comedy. And Mike was like, hey man, can you stop doing that comedy, that fucking poetry bullshit and just get into the jokes? And I was like, but they liked my poem.
But they liked my poem.
It was like, and I tell everybody to this day, man, like, I plan on bringing slam poetry and comedy back together. Like, I think those two things fit together well if you can set it up correctly the right way.
Can I have something in mind?
Where it might be like a TED Talk. So I wasn't sure.
No. I was actually going to ask: is there such a thing as comedy poetry?
Yeah.
Where the poem is jokes.
Comedy. Yeah.
Is it?
Yeah.
Okay, now I've never seen that. That sounds dope.
Out of Sacramento, Kels Barkdale he started off in poetry. He be doing shows and shit and have a witty, funny ass poems.
That's dope.
And you know what's
dope.
What's even funnier about that, I tell people, is dude that was on Def Poetry Jam, NQ, right, out of LA. Dude's dope. This motherfucker, I hit him up one time and I didn't realize you make way more money doing those fucking poetry slams than you would ever doing the fucking...
Bro.
He wanted, and this was years ago. Now he has his own TED Talk. He has everything. I want to say 12 years ago, I made myself look stupid because when I started doing shows, I hit him up and was like, hey, man, I remember seeing you down in L.A. And he was on like the Battle for L.A., dope-ass fucking MC. Cool, right? And I hit him up and I was like, could I get you up here? What do you look for pay? And he goes, bro, like, you know, what are you thinking? And I was like, look, man, just tell me because I don't want to embarrass myself. He goes, at least $1,500. And I go, sorry, bro. Like, that's not within
That's
my
a whole budget for a show on a weekend.
Like, that's not within my budget. And, you know, I don't want to say that because I don't want anybody to think that's what he costs. I know that motherfucker costs more now.
Yeah.
But that's what I'm saying is again, this was over 10 years ago where I was like, man, maybe I need to go back to doing fucking poetry, right? So I look at shit like that where I'm like, again, I let someone else tell me what they think I should be doing on stage. The only reason I haven't done it, I've told people, is because I haven't memorized one of my poems. And until I can memorize it, I won't recite it.
Next time we do a podcast, I want us all to do a poem.
No,
everybody, I'm down too.
I mean, he's done a poem, right? So he started with slam poetry too. And I said, you know, what's funny is I even have a poem about doing like dating, and one girlfriend is my slam poetry, and the other girlfriend is now stand-up comedy.
Yeah.
And I said, because it's totally different. I said, when you do slam poetry, they'll clap at the end no matter what. They'll give you your praise and applaud you, even if it's a horrible poem. But when you're doing stand-up and you think you wrote a good joke, and you're like, hey, that was the punchline, where's the laughter? I'm like, you know immediately when that shit didn't work.
Right.
And I said, that was the difference between the two. But, you know, so when it comes to comedy, man, it's just different for me because I want to be supportive, even though I may not sound supportive sometimes. I'm just an emotional fucking wreck to begin with, right?
Right. That should have been
getting right.
That should have been
infiltrate you guys with some.
Bro, you should change the name of the podcast from "In My Opinion" to "In My Feelings."
Stupid.
So, did I answer all the questions? And when should you stop?
Yeah.
Again, we said this. I ain't ever gonna stop. This is the worst.
But when should you stop?
This is the worst addiction I've ever had. I tell people, start doing heroin. Don't even attempt to do comedy. Because at least you'll have something to show. You'll be like, man, I slammed 4 fucking tons of heroin. I've got all these track marks. You'll have something to show for this shit.
Right.
Yeah.
This, I'm just here podcasting on a Friday telling you guys my fucking feelings. That's what you got.
It's fun.
This is the most like complex attempt at getting some free therapy that I've ever seen since Obamacare.
He's stupid. As for me, criticism, I'm not really there to ask for criticism, but I am mindful of who I respect the opinions from, which is a tough realization because I also firmly agree with, bruh, this entire shit is subjective. Who the fuck is anybody to tell you? Now, I do think that at some point, soon, I need to get to the point where, all right, let me go ahead and reach out to some of these bookers at the clubs and be like, yo, here's a clip. What you think? And see how to open up conversation that way to let them. Okay, if they turn me down, okay, why? How what do I need to progress on in order for you to feel comfortable with putting there? So I'm getting there because it's a little nerve wracking. It's more nerve wracking than asking for pussy because worst that shit gonna say is no.
Straight up.
A booker is gonna be like, yeah, like they'll make it seem like you don't got it. You're like, what the fuck you mean I don't got it? Everybody laughed. What you talking about? Well, I thought that you should do. You know what I'm saying? Like, so I haven't really gotten the most comfortable with that yet. In terms of support, I think you know what we often get caught up in our own ego and just our own mind and our own movie in our head that we think, man, the world is out against us. But in reality, we all get support in some way or another, whether it be your significant other, whether it be your peers, be like, nah, man, you got that shit. Look at everything you're doing well. Go ahead, you got this, man. Keep believing yourself. Or people giving game. Hey, how do you go about doing this on your taxes? Or how you do that?
Yeah.
I look at that as support. I even look at it as, well, I have a venue that allows me to throw a show there every once in a while. I don't have to pay overhead charge. I just have to meet a quota, at least of X amount of people getting there in order for it to be worthwhile for all of us.
Yeah.
So I consider that support. Now, would I like more support? Of course. Who the fuck wouldn't? You know what I'm saying? I definitely want to find ways to get more as well because gaining more support leads to progressing, propelling, as you stated for Frankie. As far as giving up, I personally feel like, man, if you really enjoy this shit and you really, really want to do it, you really want to just make people laugh, just the general principle of making people laugh on a stage with a microphone in your hand, I don't think you ever should give up, but you should adjust. So, yeah, that's when you got to start paying attention to, hey, this TED Talk shit isn't working.
Right.
Stop fucking I'm cisgendered in your way into trying to make people laugh. Nobody thinks the shit is funny. Find a better way to do it. So I think that you just got to listen to the feedback of the audience and adjust to it. But if there ever was a point for you to give up, if it's just getting to a point where it's not fun for you, then that ultimately is the part where, you know what, maybe you step back. But I've also seen some people who've dealt with issues like, you know, they notice that comedy is tied to a lack of sobriety for them, and it's fucking them up elsewhere. In that case, then maybe you want to step back, prioritize,
I'll drink to
get
that.
get shit figured out, and come back so you can be your best self and have your best foot forward at least.
I was thinking about it while you was talking about support real quick is I was thinking of support in a different matter where, like, I know I've got Ro here, right, and she's come to enough shows where I feel like support sometimes for me is something as simple as she's been there enough times to know what my fucking jokes are. Mm-hmm. So when I write a new punchline or a new tag or some shit, and she's like, hey, that new part where you talk about, that was pretty funny. Mm-hmm. I'm like, oh, damn. Like, I didn't even know you was paying attention. So sometimes it's just people that have come to the show enough times that are like, hey, they recognize it. Because to me, that means that, one, you listened all those times, and two, you noticed the new thing, too. So I was like, man, like, I just want to know that the new shit's working.
That's tough to come by. Because I used to have friends that I would do a mock-up, a mock run, if you will, of my jokes, and they just sitting there like, because they weren't comedians, they didn't necessarily it just wasn't funny to them. And then I get on stage, immediate laughter. So it's like, even that is a tough type of support to come by, and I don't think many of us do have it because you find significant others usually don't give a fuck about your. After a while, you're not funny to them.
Well, yeah.
Family members, sometimes they're not even really fucking listening to you. They're just there to support.
Right.
They're just here to be an ass in a seat. Like, and literally, that's the mentality they have. And then But yeah, finding a conducive, supportive individual. I don't know if I have many of those because it is sometimes I'll think something is hilarious and I'll run it by somebody and they're like, I didn't get it. It wasn't funny. And there's a good chance that they're wrong. And I do it on stage and oh shit, it worked. Sometimes they might be right, but very seldomly because they can't see it. Like I said, everybody in their own head is living in their own movie. You are the main character in your screenplay and you're acting it out. So there's also sometimes support like that can be detrimental because they don't see the vision that's in your head.
Right.
Now you got to make sure that you make enough people see it, but they're not going to see it because they're not in that movie. Cool. You're in a drama; they got a comedy.
I would just to add something to this concept of trying to get like feedback from your friends and shit like that. One thing that I've noticed and I really believe in it because I've seen it happen so many times. When you have a joke or a premise, right? And you ask an individual to listen to it, somebody that you trust, somebody that's been to your shows, when you ask an individual, hey man, listen to this, tell me what you think. You ain't got to laugh, just tell me if you think it's funny. The individual acts like an individual as opposed to taking that same approach where you write a premise, you write a punchline to it, at the very least, you write something that you think is interesting and that you can kind of riff off of to make it funny. When you ask an audience, a group of people, a collective, to take that in for the first time, I've noticed that the collective is way more willing to take that in for what it is, a joke, an attempt to be funny, as opposed to the individual who, for some odd reason, almost by nature, when you ask an individual to listen to an idea, they immediately go into criticism mode.
Yep.
And that's not a knock to the individual. I'm just saying that seems to be human nature. Because just let me just put a bow on it. Because motherfuckers feel special when you ask them, "Hey, will you lend your ear to this thing that I've been working on that I think is important? It's a joke, but I think it's important. Will you lend me your? Oh, you want to hear? Oh, well, let me hear it, and then I'll tell you what I really think." Yeah. As opposed to a collective, a group who, when you present them that joke for the first time, they're there listening to it together, and it's almost like they without saying it, they've all decided to be open to it as a joke. But the individual's like, "Oh, you want my criticism? You want to hear what I think?" Yeah. Go tell me what you tell me your little thing, and then I'm really gonna listen, and I'm really gonna break your shit down, and then guess what happens? You lose all the magic.
Yep.
So that's it. What I'm trying to
talk about my girlfriend.
No, I'm just saying. All I'm trying to say is be careful. Be careful when you ask an individual to criticize your joke, and be more brave to take your brand new jokes out to the collective, to the crowds, because you might get a more honest answer that way.
Mm-hmm. Very true. And I also dare argue, I've said this before, comedy is a psychological sport.
Yes.
So setting matters. That's why I hate when people tell me you're coming, tell me a joke, and we're standing face to face, looking at each other in the fucking eyes. You're not in the setting for comedy. It's not gonna work like that. And then on top of that, people are self-conscious. People are taught to hate themselves on a daily basis, so they're not confident enough to laugh at something unless they hear the domino effect of everybody else laughing. Case in point, if you don't believe me, go watch a comedy at a movie theater in the middle of the fucking day when there's only going to be about 2-3 people in there. It could be the funniest fucking scene. Nobody's going to laugh out loud because they don't want to be judged for being the only one to be laughing. But if you're in a collective audience, now, not all audiences are good because like we said before with the bars and shit, some people didn't come here for no motherfucking comedy. I hate my life. My bitch is cheating on me. I came to drink away my pain. What the fuck are you doing right now? You're ruining my vibe. So they're not necessarily in the mood. That's not, even though it's a collective, they're not in the mood for comedy. So this shit might not work with them neither. But if you're there with people who have submitted to the idea of
comedy.
There's going to be jokes. I don't know what to expect. Let's see what it does to me.
Yeah.
And just the energy is open. It's willing to accept.
More conducive.
Yeah, exactly. So
When he was talking about the bar, I was thinking, when did he see me at the bar? I was like, Jesus Christ, this was years ago. That was just me. Like, Jesus, let me drink myself away.
Well, I can't wait to see what you edit this into.
James, that's the one you think, the comedian Rick James. Get up.
I can't hear my neighbor crying, I can't breathe.
Don't forget to hit the subscribe button, as well as the notification bell. Thank you for watching.